With the blink of an eye, one of the most decorated female bobsledders in U.S. history finally gets her gold. And what a story.
Elana Meyers Taylor, 41 years old, and already going into this race, the most decorated black athlete in Winter Olympics history. In her fifth games, she comes back, manages to stay in the support, manages to keep training despite injuries, and so she wins it, pulls it off.
Plus, if you've been watching figure skating, you may have noticed a shift in the music selections the skaters use to perform. How the sport is leaning more into the social media age.
We're seeing audiences and the skaters connect with this music in a really visceral way that may not have been quite so possible when they were just dancing to sort of the same, say, 20 or so classical music war horses written oftentimes by composers who died, more than 100 years ago.
And yeah, I see you out there, you couch curlers. You think you could pull off an in-turn rotation to curve the rock? Yeah, you can't. But you're not alone if you think you can. We'll talk about the curling boom with NPR's Anusha Mathur.
Most of these clubs are planning extra learn to curl sessions because they expect people will watch the Olympics and then get so into it that they're going to want to give it a try.
I'm A Martínez, and this is Up First Winter Games. It's Tuesday, February 17th, and here's what you need to know. It was quite the scene during Monday's medal round in the men's slalom. After coming in contact with a gate during his run, Norway's Oddly McGrath stopped his race and exited the course, throwing his poles and skiing into the out-of-bounds area.
Yeah, I just need to get away from everything. Thought that I would get some peace and quiet, which I didn't because photographers and police found me out in the woods. But I just needed some time for myself.
McGrath's grandfather died the day of the opening ceremony. Hours after the event, he spoke about the race.
This is not the worst moment of my life, but it's the worst moment of my career. And it's been one of the toughest moments of my life with everything that's been going on. And I was hoping I was going to be able to, crown off this tough period with something good today.
The 25-year-old was in contention for a podium finish. In women's hockey, the gold medal match is now set after Team USA blanked Sweden 5-0. It was their fifth consecutive shutout and broke the Olympic record for the longest streak of scoreless hockey for their opponents. On Thursday, they'll play Team Canada. It's a redemption game for them, as it's a rematch from the 2022 championship in Beijing. Big news in the bobsledding world for Team USA. After 5 Olympics, a shelf full of silver and bronze medals, American bobsledder Elana Meyers Taylor finally has the one medal that eluded her. The 41-year-old rocketed down the track in the women's monobob and captured her first gold, becoming the oldest American woman to win Winter Games gold and capping off one of the most decorated careers in sliding history. NPR's Brian Mann was there. Brian, tell us all about it.
Yeah, I'm beaming about this one. I think this is my favorite moment of the Olympics so far. And let's talk a little bit more about the history-making aspect of this. Elana Meyers Taylor, 41 years old, and already going into this race, the most decorated black athlete in Winter Olympics history, but that gold medal had eluded her. So in her fifth games, she comes back, manages to stay in the support, manages to keep training despite injuries, and so she wins it, pulls it off here. She's now tied with Bonnie Blair, the speed skater, for the most medals at the Winter Olympics for any U.S. woman. And one of the things, she's been in the sport so long that she talked about meeting Bonnie Blair early in her career. So there's this real continuity of women athletes here tying through. So yeah, truly last night here in Cortina, one for the history books.
Yeah, a connection to history and also an incredible accomplishment in its own right. Tell us about the run.
Yeah, this run was remarkable. What she did is she took all those decades of experience and came into the fourth heat of this monobob race. This is a race where a single athlete pushes a small sled, dives in, pilots it down this icy, twisting, plunging track. And she managed to carve a line that was aggressive, really daring. Again, everything's on the line, such a huge amount of pressure here, but she really went for it, very smooth. And by the time it was done, she managed to finish 4/100ths of a second ahead of the German sledder who took silver. That is roughly the blink of an eye that made the difference for her in the history books. So yeah, she managed to pull it off, and she had to put everything on the line to do it.
Yeah. And, she talks a lot about being a mom and how that's important to her. She mentions it a lot. Tell us about why that's important.
Meyers Taylor has 2 special needs kids. And in order to keep training and competing, she actually worked out a deal with the U.S. Bobsled and Skeleton Federation where her kids went on tour with her. They made all the arrangements necessary for this working mom to stay in the game and to keep going. Those kids were at the finish line last night, and so you could see her hugging the American flag, then hugging her babies. It was super powerful. I'm kind of getting emotional talking about it. It was really raw and beautiful. But here's the thing that's really cool. Kaillie Humphries, who took bronze for the U.S., also a new mom. And what she pulled off last night, she won gold in this event 4 years ago, but she came back to race in these Olympics after having a very difficult pregnancy. She's talked again about this. She did IVF treatments. She was in that race last night when her abdominal muscles still had not fully healed from her being pregnant and giving birth. And so she managed to win a bronze medal last night. And she talked about that, how this was really an Olympic medal where the story was defined by motherhood. It was an extraordinary night.
Yeah, Brian, I mean, it is a great story to have these two athletes talk about the additional pressure of being a mom and a parent and what that means to them and also their careers. I mean, the pressure of just being at the Olympics has been something that a lot of people have been following. And Brian, you've actually spoken to some psychologists about exactly what that means for athletes in these games and what exactly they're dealing with.
Yeah, it's really come up a lot with U.S. athletes here, We've had some top contenders for gold medals like Ilya Malinin, the figure skater, Michaela Schifrin, the alpine skier, who haven't yet gotten their individual medals that they were hoping for. Some real disappointment there. And what sports psychologists talk about, there are terms for it. They call it the yips, getting the yips, or sometimes they talk about getting the twisties in gymnastics. Sometimes the term is more blunt. They say it's a question of choking, which is such an ugly term, but sometimes it happens to athletes. That all of that preparation and training coming into these games, here's what the experts tell me that they're aiming for. They're trying to get this down to where it's muscle memory, where essentially once they get into that start gate or jump into that bobsled or go out on that ice to do their performance, it's all dialed in. They're ready to go. But what can happen is that the pressure of these Olympics can crash down on them. Remember, most of these events, according to experts, after 4 years of preparation, it comes down to, on average, 10 minutes of actual final competition. Yeah. And so all of that pressure can kind of come to an edge there, and it just blows all that training out of their minds. And so the twisties, the yips, they can hit really hard. And we've really seen that. You know, when you saw Ilya Malinin down on the ice last Friday, that was a moment when it struck with tragic force.
And the thing, Brian, and just not with Olympic athletes, but also with athletes in general, when this does happen, it doesn't necessarily mean it's happening on the most difficult moves that they can attempt. Sometimes it's the routine things that they've done hundreds and hundreds of times, and they can't seem to get over that mental hurdle. Why does this, though, happen so often, it seems, in the Olympics?
Yeah, a lot of it's just the pressure and the scrutiny. You know, these are people who do perform consistently at World Cup meets, at national championships, but it's really until you come here, you don't realize the magnitude of the spotlight that comes on these athletes when they reach the Olympics. There is a microphone in front of them, a camera in front of them all the time. You know, when Michaela Schifrin skied in the giant slalom the other day, all the other skiers just skied normally. When she came up, this legendary alpine skier, they actually play this dramatic, like tension-building music. She has to stand there in the start gate while they throw this energy at her that's just saying, you're different, you're being watched more closely. And again, sometimes, you know, they have techniques. They've all practiced how to avoid the yips in those moments, but sometimes the walls crumble, they fall down. I spoke to one expert, Dr. Sahin Gupta, who studies this, researches it in Great Britain, and he says literally they can lose contact with their bodies. They can just lose the sense of themselves in space, and they lose their sense of gravity. It can be a powerful event.
Is there anything that you've heard of that they can do to maybe try and get over these make or break moments?
Increasingly, what we've seen is these athletes being very proactive on this. A lot of them are working with therapists and sports psychologists coming in. Really, if you're talking these days about a top tier contender, they almost always have in their team somebody who's working on the mind as much as the body, right? And you'll see, sometimes you'll hear them like playing really loud music. You'll see them dancing. You'll see them meditating sometimes. And these aren't just quirks. These are practiced things to get the mind to quiet down, right? Those are really important tools, and probably a lesson to all of us that there are moments when we need to kind of, work through our system a little bit to calm our brain. And there's another thing that's really important here is that after the yips hit, there is also a whole kind of playbook for how to help athletes recover, how to help them kind of rebuild. This Dr. Gupta that I spoke to said the experience of going through an event like this is really like grief. They're suffering a loss event. It's very baffling in the moment that all of that work, 4 years of work, implodes in a single moment. And so there's a really important time for these athletes after they fumble, after they fall short, where they need support, they need help. And I'll say the hopeful, really cool thing on the back end of this, is that if they use those techniques, often after they do that kind of collapse, they come back stronger. You'll remember Nathan Chen, the great figure skater, absolutely fell apart in South Korea, came back in China and triumphed. Same thing for Simone Biles, the gymnast, fell apart in Tokyo, had the twisties so bad she had to withdraw from competition. 4 years later in Paris, she was the great star of the Paris Olympics. And so a lot of these people we're seeing struggle here in Milan Cortina. These are going to be the great athletes we're going to see in another 4 years.
Yeah, and Milan, to his credit, when it was over, he answered everyone's questions. He stood there and took the heat and just admitted that he blew it, admitted that he may have been too confident and handled it with a lot of poise. So I mean, if that's the first step toward recovery after a huge disappointment, he at least is certainly on his way. NPR's Brian Mann. Brian, thanks a lot.
Thanks, A.
Support for Up First Winter Games comes from NPR sponsor Allianz Travel Insurance. Get ready to give ordinary the cold shoulder with protection for adventures that give you the best kind of chills. Learn more at AllianzTravelInsurance.com.
If you've been watching any of the figure skating events during this Olympics, you may have noticed something a little different. And I'm talking about the music. In figure skating, it often used to sound like this. Okay, now these days, though, it might sound a little more like this. After decades of sticking to classical works like Maurice Ravel's Bolero, Olympic figure skaters from around the world are adopting perhaps a fresher playlist. Here to talk about the shift in the music figure skaters dance to and its impact on this year's games in Italy is NPR's Chloe Veltman. Hello, Chloe.
Hi there, eh?
All right, so why are figure skaters making this shift?
Well, it's the International Skating Union, known as the ISU, which is the body that oversees the sport, that decided to take this step in order to modernise the sport and reach a younger audience. And also, figure skaters, they have embraced this whole idea of dancing to pop songs and music from movies, TV shows, animated series, because it's an opportunity to create these viral moments on social media. And as the sport is moving away from broadcast, in terms of its popularity, you can really build a fan base on these platforms like TikTok and Instagram and YouTube.
So they're just like all of us. We all want a younger audience, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. All right, so how did this then come about?
Well, this came about in the 2014-2015 season when the ISU decided that it was going to allow for the first time figure skaters to use vocal music. Before, it had only been instrumental music, like, orchestral music, for example. And this change took place at the Olympics for the first time in 2018 at the South Korean Olympics. So this Olympics in Italy is in effect the third time that figure skaters have had the opportunity to perform to this much broader musical palette.
Okay, so this change, how do we see this change on the ice?
Well, it's created these very emotional, very spectacular moments. We're seeing audiences and the skaters connect with this music in a really visceral way that may not have been quite so possible when they were just dancing to sort of the same, say, 20 or so classical music war horses written oftentimes by composers who died, more than 100 years ago.
So it sounds like a win for everyone. Are there any downsides?
Yeah, well, there is one major downside, and that's to do with the copyright infringement issue, which has really reared its head. Yeah, so in the past, when people were just performing to classical music, it was in the public domain, they didn't have to worry so much about securing rights. But when the ISU decided to allow vocal music, well, a lot of it is contemporary. These big pop stars, their work is very much overseen and managed by major record labels and artists' estates. And so it's become absolutely crucial for figure skaters to make sure they have permissions to perform their routines to this music. Now, the Olympics committee has this rule that says, yes, it's very important. You have to secure, if you're a figure skater at the Olympics, all of the permissions for every single piece of music that you use. Because, I mean, the risks are considerable. And this was really seen for the first time at the 2020, after the 2022 Olympics in Beijing, when this American figure skating couple, Alexa Knierim and Brandon Fraser, they were sued by a musical duo, the Heavy Young Heathens, for using that group's version of the song House the Rising Sun.
Oh boy, so what happened there?
Well, NBC was also named in the lawsuit. It was settled out of court for an undisclosed sum. But understandably, the figure skating community became really quite skittish about musical choices after that.
Yeah, I can imagine. So then what do figure skaters do to try to make sure that they can dance and skate to the music they want?
Yep, well, there are these online systems like Click and Clear, which are supposed to streamline the rights clearance process for figure skaters, but these systems aren't foolproof. And a few performers at the Olympics, a few figure skaters this year have fallen afoul of permissions issues, most notably Spain's Tomás Llorens Sabaté was supposed to perform a routine to music, a medley of music from the Minions, the animated film. He'd been rehearsing it for months, and he found out really not very long before he was supposed to go out there on the ice and perform it that not all the permissions had been secured. There was a big outcry on social media with fans going to the hashtag Let the Minions Skate and airing their concerns. And at the 11th hour, finally all the permissions came through and he was able to do that routine.
Imagine practicing for months with one particular song. It works perfect for you, and then all of a sudden you can't get clearance. That has to be awful.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. And there have been performers who've had to change their routines at the last minute as a result of this problem, eh?
Yeah. Oh, so, okay, for classical music, though, does that mean that it's over for classical music as far as being part of the Olympic figure skating competition?
Oh, no. Classical music continues to be a part of it. You have performers, for example, like an American couple that chose Romeo and Juliet by Sergei Prokofiev for this year's Olympics, and a South Korean couple that chose Samuel Barber's Adagio for strings. So classical music is very much still alive and well, and it does lend itself very beautifully to the sport. Plus, you don't always have to worry so much about securing difficult permissions.
There we go. NPR's Chloe Veltman. Chloe, thanks a lot.
A real pleasure. Thanks, A.
This next one is for all you gold medal armchair athletes out there. You know who you are, sitting there watching the Winter Games every 4 years, pining over the beautiful skating swizzles and sick skiing aerials. If there was only a sport with an easier learning curve, well, enter curling. That's the sport that inspires legions of Americans to pick up a broom every 4 years. Here's my conversation with NPR's Anusha Mathur. So I'll admit, when it comes to curling, there is probably no other sport in the Winter Olympics, maybe in the entire Olympics, that people can say, I can do that. I can push a stone. I can sweep. I do it all the time. That's what people tell me all the time, but they're wrong.
Well, I was one of those people, and it's a lot harder than it looks. So the basic premise of curling is you're trying to get your granite stones from one end of the ice sheet to the other. And you got to put a little finesse on it when you curl. Those stones are like 40 pounds, so it was a lot heavier than I expected. Then some players can sweep the ice vigorously, and I had to sweep a lot harder than I expected to. I was working up a sweat.
Really?
Yeah.
How hard? What level of sweep energy would you say you put out?
I had to put my back into it. Like I was sweeping for dear life. It's not like sweeping your kitchen floor. But I will say there were high schoolers there were people who were 80 plus, so you can modify your sweeping level depending on your athletic ability. And there was even an 80-year-old who had a special stick to help him so he wouldn't have to bend as low when he was letting go of the stone. So I think it can be as challenging or as accessible as you want, but I'm a competitive person, so I was trying to go all out, and it took all of my energy.
So I'll admit, like getting ready for the Winter Olympics, I took, one of those those little Roomba house dirt picker upper things, and I got in front of it. I was sweeping to try and see if I could do it. But I mean, that's the essence of people are doing, right? They're trying to get in front of the stone and kind of determine its direction with the sweep.
Exactly. So when you're sweeping in front of the stone, you're kind of on a microscopic level dissolving some of the ice. So it helps the stone either change its path or go further on the ice. So where you want it to go.
And is that person that is actually doing the sweeping, do they know what direction? Because I hear the other team member usually screaming out commands.
Yes. So usually a curling team will have 4 people. So there's one person who's screaming to make sure the rest of their team can hear what's going on. One person is letting go of the curling stone. The other 2 people are sweeping. They pretty much know where the stone is going to end up, but it's that person who's yelling out commands that tells them, sweep, 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 or stop, stop, stop.
Yeah. So here's the thing with curling. I think the interest always peaks right around Winter Olympics time, right? And that's exactly what curling is, right? If people kind of look at it, maybe they forget about it, but then 4 years later, they're right back into it. And you reported on this, right? That there is like a growing wave every 4 years of people just getting into curling.
Totally. It's a really huge deal for these clubs. Most of these clubs are planning extra learn to curl sessions because they expect people will watch the Olympics and then get so into it that they're going to want to give it a try. Some smaller clubs like the club in Easton, the Chesapeake Curling Club, they are a bit smaller and they really depend on these learn to curl sessions to kind of generate some extra revenue during Olympics time years. They're running 3 times more learn to curls this year than in normal years. They've already had like 200 people come through their doors, they told me. 200.
Well, okay, that's nice, but how many people actually stick with it once they start?
So that's the question, I think. I think lots of people, they do this learn to curl session and then they put their brooms down. But a lot of the avid recreational curlers I talked to had Olympics origin stories. So they all got into it during an Olympics. Yeah, exactly. Like they all got into it during an Olympics year and decided to stick with it. And I think part of the reason why is just that it's so accessible. It's something that you can play into your old age. And I think the culture surrounding it is very welcoming. When I was there, I learned about this tradition called broom stacking.
Broom stacking.
Yes, broom stacking, which is basically that it's required in curling that after the game, the winning team buys the losing team the first round of drinks. This is like written into the curling bylaws somewhere. And some people said that broom stacking is actually secretly their favorite part of the game.
So whether you win or lose, you're still getting some beers, right?
Exactly. And if you win, you get the glory. If you lose, you get free beer. So you win either way.
Yeah. All right. So someone's watching this, they've been watching curling at the Olympics, and they want to legitimately and give it a shot. I mean, really try it. How available is it for people to start?
So curling originated in Scotland and was really popular in cold weather places, like Canada, the upper Midwest. But now curling is indoors, which means that you can do it even in a warm weather place. I went to curling rinks around the DC, Virginia, Maryland area, which is really not a winter wonderland. So that shows it can be done anywhere. And some of the curlers I talked to, they said they had curled in Tennessee, Florida. So I feel like if you're curling curious, you might be surprised by what's in your area.
Curling curious. I love it. I love it. All right. So are you hooked now? Are you a fan now that you've actually experienced it firsthand?
So I've done more curling in the last week than I've done in my entire life. And I feel like I am hooked. I want to put a team together of my friends and I want to force them to join a league with me because I think we would dominate.
See, okay. So if you do, please keep me in mind. Because the sweep part, I think I can do.
Well, I think that since you've practiced with your Roomba, you're ready to get out on the ice.
I know. All right. We'll see if I become an Olympian, at least maybe in my mind. NPR's Anusha, Mathur, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's Up First Winter Games for Tuesday, February 17th. Don't forget to click subscribe, and you can donate to help keep our Olympics coverage going. Hit the blue button to give today. I'm A Martínez. We'll see you right back here Wednesday and most days during the Olympic Games. Have a gold medal day.